He thought it was just a blind date until she said, "You don't remember me, do you?" Marcus Chen checked his watch again. 6:43 p.m. He had no idea why he'd agreed to this. His sister had begged him to go, just one blind date. "Marcus, you need to talk to someone who isn't a board member or an investor." He had caved only to stop her relentless calls. Now he sat at a small café on Main Street in the sleepy Vermont town he'd left years ago, a place that still smelled of rain-soaked pine and roasted coffee. He had promised himself he'd give this exactly 15 minutes. Then he could leave with a polite smile and a clear conscience. When the door opened, he barely looked up. A gust of cold air slipped in, followed by a woman's quiet voice. "Marcus Chen," he turned. She stood by his table, a touch out of breath. Blonde hair twisted loosely into a soft bun, a few curls falling against her cheek. Her dress was a simple floral pattern, not designer, but graceful. Her eyes were light blue, alert yet gentle. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she said. "The roads are terrible tonight." "It's all right," Marcus replied, rising automatically. He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Please." She smiled and sat, setting her small purse beside her. "Thank you for waiting. I almost thought you'd leave." "I considered it," he admitted dryly. Her laugh was low, genuine, and somehow disarmed him. They ordered black coffee for him, chamomile tea for her, and for a few minutes the conversation skimmed the surface. Work, weather, how small the town still felt. She didn't mention his company, didn't ask about the magazine profiles or Forbes lists. It was oddly refreshing. Just as he began to relax, she leaned forward slightly, studying him. "You don't remember me, do you?" Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry." A faint, knowing smile touched her lips. "You saved me once, Marcus, when I was just a hungry kid hiding behind the book stacks." The words hit him like a soft but sudden blow. His fingers stilled around the coffee cup. "Saved her? A hungry kid? Book stacks?" He searched her face, the curve of her smile, the glimmer of memory that refused to form. Nothing clear, just a flicker, a whisper of a moment buried somewhere deep. He started, but the words fell away. Across from him, the blonde woman only smiled a little wider, her blue eyes steady. Marcus didn't remember, but something in her tone, in the quiet certainty of it, pressed against a locked place in his mind. Marcus stared at her, unsure how to respond. Across the table, the woman, Elena, held his gaze with calm confidence. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I really don't remember." "I didn't think you would," she replied gently. "You were a teenager. I was a scrawny little girl in hand-me-downs. You had no reason to notice me." Marcus leaned back slightly, frowning. "And yet you're here." Elena gave a small shrug, almost playful. "I figured if fate was bold enough to toss us into a blind date together, I should at least say thank you properly." As they began to eat, Marcus asked, "So, what do you do now when you're not catching people off guard on blind dates?" Elena smiled. "I work part-time as a librarian, the public library in town." He raised an eyebrow. "Still hiding behind the book stacks, then?" "Only during story time," she teased, then added, "It's mostly so I can spend more time with my daughter." "You have a daughter?" he asked, genuinely surprised. "Mira," she said with a warm smile. "She's 4, loves ballet, pink dresses, and dinosaur picture books." Marcus let out a short laugh. "Sounds like a handful." "She is," Elena nodded, her smile turning soft, proud. "But she's the best part of my life." He found himself curious. "Where's your husband?" Her gaze flicked down for a brief second. "There never really was one. It's just been me and Mira from the beginning." He nodded, respectful of her boundaries. "That must be hard." Elena gave a light shrug. "Sometimes, but this town makes it easier. People look out for each other mostly." There was a pause. Then she asked, "Do you remember the library at all?" "Barely," he admitted. "I used to stop there after school. It was quiet, peaceful." "You brought a sandwich and orange juice every day," she said. He looked at her, startled. "I remember," she continued, her voice a little quieter now. "I used to sit near the children's section and pretend I was reading, but mostly I was just trying not to be hungry. One day you left your lunch on the table and walked away. You didn't say a word. I waited 10 minutes before touching it because I thought maybe it was a mistake." "It wasn't," he said automatically, surprising even himself. she smiled. I figured that out eventually. And after that, every few days you'd leave your lunch in the same spot. No note, no conversation, just kindness. Marcus's jaw tightened, emotions he could not name stirring behind his ribs. I never knew your name back then, she added. Not until tonight. He sat in stunned silence. A blurry image flickered in his memory. His hands setting down a brown paper bag next to a silent, small girl with tangled blonde hair. I didn't think anyone noticed, he said quietly. I did, Elena replied, and I never forgot. Marcus looked at her, truly looked at her, not as a date, not as a stranger, but as someone tied to a version of himself he had long buried. For the first time in a long while, he did not feel like Marcus Chen, CEO. He just felt human. The next morning, Marcus sat at his hotel desk, staring at the untouched cup of coffee growing cold beside his laptop. He had told himself he was leaving town by noon, but something about last night lingered. Elena's voice, her story, the way her words had pulled a forgotten part of him back into focus. By early afternoon, he found himself parking across from the public library. The building was small, brick-faced with ivy curling around the windows. He hesitated at the entrance, then pushed the door open. The warmth hit first, followed by the scent of old paper and vanilla-scented disinfectant. Children's laughter echoed softly from the far corner. He stepped inside and nearly laughed. In the children's section, a small group of toddlers and preschoolers were sitting on mushroom-shaped cushions, listening to a young woman read from a picture book. And right in the center, twirling slowly in a pink dress and ballet slippers, was a little girl. That had to be her. Mira. Before he could decide if he should interrupt, the girl spotted him. She stopped mid-twirl, tilted her head, and marched right over. You, she said matter-of-factly, pointing a tiny finger up at him. Are you Mom's friend from the date? Marcus's mouth opened and nothing came out. Elena appeared from behind a nearby shelf. Mira, she hissed, trying not to laugh. Let's not shout our personal business across the whole library. Marcus, thoroughly embarrassed, managed a sheepish smile. I knew it, Mira said triumphantly. You're the man from the date. The one with the serious face. Marcus chuckled. Serious face, huh? Elena approached, hands full of children's books. She looked amused. I told her a little about you. Apparently, I may have described you as intense. You said he looked like a statue with a tie, Mira announced proudly. Marcus burst out laughing. Well, that's one I haven't heard before. Mira leaned in closer, studying his face with unfiltered curiosity. Then she whispered, not quietly at all. Mr. Marcus, you're not scary at all, like Mom said. Marcus froze. Elena's eyes widened. Mira, but he raised a hand gently. It's okay. Something in his chest cracked open just a little. That one sentence, spoken in a child's voice, completely sincere, cut through more layers than a dozen boardroom compliments ever had. I promise I'm not scary, he told her softly. I just forget how to smile sometimes. Mira nodded as if that made perfect sense. You should practice. Smiling makes your eyebrows go up. It's better, he laughed again, his shoulders loosening. Elena gave him a long, warm look. What brings you here anyway? She asked. He cleared his throat. I was in the area. You came to a library in a town you haven't visited in over 10 years just to be in the area? He gave her a look. Maybe I was curious. About me or about her ballet routine? She asked, nodding toward Mira, who had already returned to her pirouettes among the bookshelves. Both, he admitted. They stood side by side, watching the little girl spin and giggle. And for the first time since he had returned, Marcus did not feel like a stranger in this town. He just felt seen. Marcus showed up at Elena's door just after 5, holding a brightly illustrated book in one hand. Mira dropped this, he said as soon as she opened the door. She was too busy twirling through the nonfiction aisle. Elena blinked, then smiled. Oh, no, not Dancing Dinosaurs. She's been asking for that one for days. He handed it over. I figured it might be important. She laughed softly. You figured right. Want to come in for a minute? Marcus hesitated, then nodded. The house was small and older, but tidy and warm. Faded wallpaper, framed drawings clearly made by little hands. The faint smell of cinnamon and crayons lingering in the air. It was the kind of home built slowly with care, not money. Mira's with the neighbor, Elena explained. They're making cookies. I only agreed because she promised not to touch the oven. Smart mom. As Marcus glanced around, his eye caught something on the dining table. A stack of mail. A pale yellow envelope sat half open on top. He was not trying to snoop, but the bold letters across the top were hard to miss. Final notice. Foreclosure warning. Elena noticed his pause. Her smile faltered. She crossed the room quickly, scooping up the papers and pressing them against her chest. It's nothing, she said too quickly. Marcus turned to her. Elena, it's just a delay in payments. I'll work it out. Her tone was firm, almost defensive. I didn't ask you here to talk about my bills. I didn't think you did, he said gently. But I'd like to help. She shook her head. No, that's not why I invited you in. I know. I also know the library is barely getting by. I've seen it. He took a step closer. What if we worked on something together? I could fund a reading and education program through the library, something permanent. We could hire more staff, expand the kids section, host events. Elena's expression shut down before he could finish. Marcus, she said quietly. I don't want to be your charity. He blinked, stunned. That's not what this is. It might not feel that way to you, she replied, her voice calm but steady. But to me, that's exactly what it feels like. He ran a hand through his hair. Elena, I'm offering to invest. This isn't about pity. Easy for you to say, she said, arms folding. You walk in, see a foreclosure notice, and suddenly you're ready to fix it all like it's just another business problem. But this isn't business. This is my life. I know that. Do you? She asked softly. Because I've spent years building this life, this home for Mira without help. And I don't want the first person who steps in to fix things just because he can afford to. Marcus felt the sting behind her words. Not anger, just disappointment, and a wall rising between them. I didn't mean to offend you. Elena's expression softened slightly, but her eyes stayed guarded. I know, and I appreciate that you care, but this town has seen its share of rich men swoop in and save things. They always leave, and they usually take something with them. He looked down, the weight of unspoken history pressing between them. After a long silence, he said, I didn't come to take anything from you. I know, she whispered, and he did not stay long after that. It was nearly midnight when Marcus's phone rang. He almost did not answer. But when he saw the caller ID, M. Jameson, Elena's neighbor's number, he picked up immediately. Mr. Chen, the woman's voice was strained. I didn't know who else to call. Mira's very sick. Elena's trying to drive her to the hospital, but her car wouldn't start. She's panicking. I'm on my way, Marcus said before she could finish. The drive took nearly 2 hours, the road slick with freezing rain. When he finally pulled up to Elena's darkened street, she was sitting on the porch steps in a sweatshirt and leggings, cradling Mira in her lap. The little girl was burning with fever, her face flushed, her arms limp around her mother's neck. Without a word, Marcus got out, opened the passenger door, and held out his arms. Elena hesitated for a second. Then she handed Mira over. She just started burning up, she whispered, voice breaking. I didn't know what else to do. We're going to take care of her, Marcus said quietly. He drove them to St. Vincent's Medical Center, the only hospital in the region equipped for pediatric emergencies. He gave no last name, no explanation of who he was, just handed over his credit card and asked for the best available care. Elena stayed with the nurses while Mira was checked in. Marcus remained in the waiting room, pacing. When Elena returned, eyes red but steadier, he handed her a cup of water. She's stable, she said. They gave her fluids, said it was a strong flu. If the fever drops in a few hours, we can take her home. Marcus exhaled slowly. Thank God. Elena sat beside him, hands trembling slightly in her lap. I can't believe this is happening. I couldn't even afford the intake fee. If you hadn't, you don't have to thank me, he interrupted softly. You're her mom. That's your job. Let this be mine. Later, after Mira was moved to a private recovery room, Elena left briefly to talk to the billing nurse. Marcus stayed. The room was dim, lit only by a small reading lamp in the corner. Mira slept fitfully, cheeks pink, her little fists curled by her chin. Marcus sat beside her, a children's picture book open in his lap. One of the ones she had proudly recommended at the library. He read quietly, his voice steady, calm. Every so often, he dipped a cloth in cool water and wiped her forehead. When Elena returned, she stopped in the doorway. Marcus was still reading, his voice low and warm. Mira had shifted in her sleep, head resting lightly against his arm, breathing evenly. He looked up when he noticed her. "I hope it's okay," he said softly. "She was asking for you, then she just drifted off." Elena nodded slowly, stepping inside. "I've never seen anyone do that for us," she whispered. Her voice cracked. Marcus looked at her, really looked, and something shifted between them. The air felt different now, not heavier, but more honest. "You two shouldn't have to do everything alone," he said. Elena walked over and sat beside him, silent for a moment. She reached out and gently brushed a curl from Mira's damp forehead. "She's lucky you were here." "I'm lucky she trusts me," he said. They sat together in the quiet hum of the room. No words left to fill the silence. Just the soft breathing of a child and the quiet, unexpected peace of not feeling alone. They walked in silence beneath the canopy of early spring trees, the hospital now far behind them. Mira had been discharged an hour earlier, her fever finally broken. She was back home, asleep in her bed, curled around a stuffed dinosaur. Elena had offered Marcus coffee as a thank you, but he had suggested a walk instead. Now, the two of them strolled slowly through the quiet residential streets. "It hasn't changed much," he murmured. Elena glanced up at him. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" He gave a small smile. "Used to be the worst thing in the world." They walked a few more steps before he spoke again, his voice lower. "My mom died here." Elena looked at him gently but said nothing. "We left town not long after," he continued. "My dad's business collapsed. Bankruptcy scandal. I was 15. Everyone I thought were friends disappeared overnight. We couldn't afford our house anymore, or much of anything. And then she got sick." Elena stopped walking. Marcus slowed beside her. "I hated this place for a long time," he admitted. "Every corner, every street just reminded me of what we lost, what I couldn't fix." "You were a kid," she said softly. He nodded, jaw tight. "I know that now. But for a long time I thought if I worked hard enough, earned enough, built something powerful enough, maybe I could rewrite all that." Elena looked at him, eyes searching. "And did it work?" He let out a breath. "I built the company. The money came. Recognition. But none of it ever felt like enough." A light breeze rustled the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Marcus turned to face her fully. "But when I walked into that library," he said, "and saw Mira twirling in her little pink dress, and you smiling like the world wasn't falling apart, I didn't feel like I needed to fix anything. I just wanted to be there." Elena's expression softened. "That's a big thing for someone who sees the world in terms of problems to solve." "I don't want to solve you," he said, half laughing. "Or her. I just want to be part of whatever this is." They stood in silence, the air thick with something tender and real. Then Elena said quietly, "Maybe you left the pain here, and now you're finding the healing." Marcus blinked. The words hung in the space between them. Gentle but profound. For a man who spent most of his life measuring things in metrics and milestones, her words felt like truth. Not something to quantify, just something to feel. The knock on Elena's door came just after sunset. She wasn't expecting anyone, and when she opened it, the sight of the man standing there made her heart drop. "Hello, Elle," he said smoothly. She instinctively stepped in front of the doorway. "Ryan," she said, voice tight. "What are you doing here?" "I heard you're doing well," he said, glancing over her shoulder. "Met someone. A real high roller, huh?" She did not respond. Ryan's smile did not reach his eyes. Thought I should check in, since I never really got my chance to be part of Mira's life? Elena crossed her arms. You had chances. You just didn't take them. Well, he said, shrugging, maybe it's time I did. The meaning behind his words chilled her. She slammed the door without another word. 2 days later, she was served with custody papers. The official notice shook her more than she wanted to admit. Ryan had never cared before. He had never paid a cent in child support. But now, suddenly, he wanted to play the father card. Because of Marcus. Because he saw what she had or what he thought she was about to have. Elena stared at the legal document, her hands trembling. Later that night, when Marcus came by with dinner and one of Mira's forgotten stuffed animals, she tried to hide it. But he saw the papers on the kitchen counter. He read the headline and looked at her. Elena, he said softly, you don't have to do this alone. She shook her head. I'm not letting you get involved. You're not letting me help because, if I do, she said, her voice shaking, and I lose, then it will feel like I lost everything. Marcus stepped closer. This isn't about pride anymore. It is to me, she snapped, then softened. I know your world, Marcus. Lawyers, contracts, power plays, but that's not mine. I can't let you fight my battles. He did not argue. He just nodded, but when he left that night, he made one call, and his lawyers went to work. He told them only 2 things. Help her without ever mentioning his name, and make sure Mira never gets pulled into something ugly. The courtroom was small, quiet, filled with shadows and tension. Elena sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, barely hearing her attorney speak. Ryan sat across from her, clean-shaven, wearing a borrowed suit and smug expression. Then the judge began reading from a letter that had been submitted with her file, anonymous but thorough. It detailed a private educational trust set aside for Mira's schooling, full medical coverage until age 18, and a commitment to support her quietly without interference or public attention. No conditions, no strings. Elena turned in her seat. In the very last row near the door, Marcus sat alone. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. She pressed her lips together, tears threatening. When the judge awarded her full custody and denied Ryan's petition due to years of absence and lack of financial support, she closed her eyes and breathed for the first time in days. Outside, the spring air was still. Elena stepped down the courthouse steps, spotting Marcus near the sidewalk. She walked over slowly. I told you not to get involved, she said quietly. You told me not to fight for you, he replied. So I didn't. I fought for her. Elena blinked, and something inside her cracked wide open. You did all that without needing credit. I did it because I could, he said simply. And because she deserves a future with her mom, safe, secure, uninterrupted. Elena swallowed hard. Thank you, Marcus gave a small smile. You don't owe me anything. She took his hand. I know, she whispered. But I'm giving it anyway. 3 months later, the town looked different. Not in the way of buildings or streets, but in the way it felt to Marcus as he stepped out of his newly opened satellite office tucked above the café where he had first met Elena. The mornings were quieter here. The people waved, and for the first time in years, his calendar had breathing space built into it. Half the week he stayed in Boston. The other half he was here, in the town he once ran from, now slowly becoming home again. That morning, he adjusted his tie in the mirror and glanced at the small box on his desk. Not velvet, not brand new, just an old keepsake box with smooth edges and a gold hinge slightly scuffed from time. Inside, nestled on the cushion, was a ring, not an engagement ring. Not yet. He tucked it into the desk drawer and headed out. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for the newly expanded children's wing of the library was already underway when he arrived. Elena stood at the front, welcoming local families. Her hair swept into a loose bun, cheeks flushed from excitement. Mira ran ahead in her signature pink dress, twirling as usual, arms flung wide like she owned the world. The plaque outside read, "In celebration of curiosity and courage," sponsored anonymously. Marcus stayed near the back, watching. When the speeches ended and the crowd filtered inside, He slipped away into his office upstairs to grab a file. He had just opened the door when a small voice piped up behind him. "Mr. Marcus, your office is messy." He turned to see Mira standing in the doorway, hands on her hips. He laughed. "I wasn't expecting company." She marched inside like she lived there, then paused at his desk. Her eyes lit up. "What's this?" she asked, reaching for the small box he'd left just slightly ajar. Marcus moved to stop her, but paused when she looked up at him with that innocent, unfiltered honesty. "Is this for Mom?" she asked. "Because I think she likes you now." "A lot," Marcus smiled, kneeling beside her. "It's not a ring for asking a big question," he said, "but maybe for making a promise." Mira considered that, then nodded. "That's okay. She still likes promises." Downstairs, music played softly, and the scent of fresh-baked cookies floated through the air. Marcus spotted Elena near the doorway, talking to a reporter from the town paper. He walked over and gently touched her elbow. "Can I steal you for a second?" he asked. She turned, surprised but smiling. "Sure." They stepped outside to the back garden, where string lights hung between trees and the laughter of children echoed faintly from inside. Marcus took a deep breath. "This town's changed," he said. Elena raised an eyebrow. "You mean you've changed?" "Maybe both." He pulled the small box from his pocket and held it out to her. She looked at it, then at him. "This ring," he said, opening it slowly, "isn't a proposal. Not yet. It's a promise." Elena's eyes welled as he continued. "A promise that I remember you now. Not just that moment in the library, but everything since. And I won't forget again." She didn't speak, just nodded through the tears, lips trembling. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a delicate, simple band with a pale stone. And she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. From behind them, a giggle erupted. They turned just in time to see Mira bounding down the steps. "Mr. Marcus," she shouted, flinging her arms around his legs. "Now you're stuck with us forever." Elena laughed through her tears. Marcus crouched to scoop Mira into his arms. "Stuck with you?" he said. "That sounds like the best deal I've ever made." And under the soft glow of garden lights, surrounded by the sounds of a library reborn, the three of them stood together, not just as strangers crossing paths, but as something whole, something new, something worth staying for.